You're listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast. And we're live!
It's as synced as an octopus's legs, isn't it? Fantastic. Well, welcome to the Guitar Heroes podcast number 3. Yes, number 3. And I am here today with Mr. Lee Williams. Hello, Lee.
Hello.
Give us a twang on your guitar, Lee.
A twang.
Lovely. And I'm here with the one and only Mr. Chris Anthony Taylor. Hello, Chris.
Hello. How's it going?
It's going to be better when I get a twang off you.
Okay.
Oh.
That's disgusting, wasn't it?
That's good. And I'm here, so we've got... So I'm here, and we've got a special guest on our podcast. I mean, 3rd episode in, and we have a special guest. You can probably guess who it is if you listen to episode 2, but doing the guitar. I mean, I've been personally doing the guitar show for 6-7 years now, and believe it or not, I did my first gig at 11, so I've got 30 years of gigging experience under my belt, and I have to say, this guy he's a drummer, and I have to say that this drummer is probably up there as one of the best drummers I've ever worked with. And, well, I say best. What I really mean is cleanest. He's probably the cleanest drummer that I've ever worked with. So
You haven't stayed in a room with him.
Oh, that's a good point, Lee. That is a very good point. Yeah. We'll give a big round of applause, everybody, from behind your Apple earphones to Mr. Allan Varnfield.
Way!
Thanks for joining us, Al. Good night. See you later. Right, let's get back to the podcast.
I've got a bone to pick with you, though, Phil. What do you mean up there?
What do you mean
with
up
the
there?
best?
Up there with them. Well, you're not quite the best, Al. But you're up there with them.
Oh,
I meant to say
mate.
cleanest. You're up there with the cleanest. Yeah.
Cheers.
Lee disagrees.
Thank you for having me on, though, chaps. I'm sorry to barge in on your guitar chat.
No,
I
it's
hope you
good.
don't
It's
mind.
not just about that. It's about. Well, we want everybody to meet everyone in the show as well, don't we? So I think it's good that people know who you are, because a lot of people are going to be listening to these podcasts through the guitar show, the Story of Guitar Heroes channels and what have you. So yeah, let's meet Allan Varnfield.
Well, there we go. We've met Allan Varnfield, so shall we move on, everybody?
I'll see you next week.
Yeah. And we should also maybe mention that or to everybody, because they can't see what's going on, obviously. We are going to incorporate cameras at some point, I think. But we've kind of, it's an evening, isn't it? It's what is it time? Is it around 7:30ish? Is it now?
It is. It's
Something
very
like that.
civilised at the moment. Very
7:24.
Oh, 7:24. There we go. That's good. And so we thought we'd have a bit of a because obviously we're in different locations. It's a bit of a night in with the beer, isn't it?
It
Or
is. It's a
something like- well, I haven't.
lockdown lock-in.
And green tea.
Chris has got a green tea. I'm going to set the scene, guys. Okay, so just be quiet a minute. Ready? Here we go. You ready? Hang on.
Oh.
It's like
There we go.
ASMR, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, lovely.
Now, can everybody tell what I'm drinking?
Ribena.
Bismol.
This is actually
Is
Listerine
that Calpol?
mouthwash.
Is that Calpol?
Calpol, yeah. Good night. This is actually, believe it or not, a bottle of 1947 port.
Wow.
Oh, lovely.
Did
No,
you
not
buy
the year.
bottle
It cost me
when
£19.47. That's
Nice.
You've been working on that one, haven't you?
I nearly got it right. Yeah. Oh dear. Someone else talk. I'm getting drunk.
Well, welcome to episode 3. This is episode 3, and we are coming to you via the magic of Zoom tonight, because of course we're still under the UK lockdown restrictions, so we're in our individual households, and after 10-15 minutes of technical fun, we have managed to get things running, and then we're going to sync it all up later and hope for the best. So thank you to everyone who's listened to episode 1 and 2 so far. We've officially launched the podcast now, and I have to say the response has been great. So thank you, guys. Chaps, what are we talking about tonight?
I think it'd be good to maybe talk a little bit about how we got into music. As we've got Mr. Varnfield on the show as well, we could all maybe talk just a little bit about how we got into music and what got us into it, influencers, and maybe things like that. That'd be
Sounds
quite
good.
nice. Cause,
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. I just thought of that second. This port is really good stuff. I tell you what, don't want to drink too much.
Do you know, I appreciate a good port. It's getting close to Christmas too.
Do you know what, Chris? This is actually maybe we could get a sponsor going on here. I don't know, but this is Fletcher's port. It's a Ruby Reserve from the Isle of Aldi. Or an isle in Aldi. It's an isle in Aldi. Sorry, that's right.
He's
Well, that
full of them today.
should pair up nicely with your driving whiskey.
He's on form tonight. Actually, you say that, Phil, but I've got a lovely Napoleon brandy here from another isle in Aldi. So I think we should be going for Aldi sponsorship tonight.
Yeah, and we definitely, if anybody out there is listening who is maybe thinking of sponsoring, we don't want green tea that Chris is drinking. You can shove that. We want alcohol. Thanks.
To be honest, I could have said I was drinking, Jack Daniels or something. No one can see this anyway.
In a
Just
teacup.
too honest.
So I tell you what, let's as Al's the guest on the show, we should probably give him the first opportunity to say, Al, who are you? What you doing, and where you're from, and things like that. How did you get into this business, Al?
Oh, dearie me. So rewind to.
Okay, Chris, how did you get into
I'll set the scene, guys. Rewind your mind back to, if I was born in 1985, what year would it be when I was 13? Do the maths for me, someone. What would that be? That would be
98.
98, yeah. So there I am, young Alan, in English
God, that was
lessons
quick for me.
with my mate Tom, who's also a very good drummer, and we fancied ourselves as class
Do you have his
clowns.
number?
Well, yeah, I do. We fancied ourselves as class clowns, and we used to make up little drumming duet rhythms between us on the tables, just showing off in front of everybody. And one day the English teacher said, "Guys, I'm fed up of you annoying our English class. Here's a form to sign up for drum lessons. Go and waste some of your energy there and stop interrupting our classes." So basically, yeah, me and Tom signed up for drumming lessons, and the rest is history, really. So as soon as I started drums around the age of about, like I say, 13, 14, I just completely fell in love with it, and there was no looking back for me. Within 2 years of starting, I had my place booked at the ACM, the Academy of Contemporary Music, it's called, the same uni where Ed Sheeran and people like that studied. So quite a whirlwind, really, if you think, from being 13, 14, never having any interest really in music as such, or wanting to play drums or anything like that. Suddenly started drums, and I just fell in love with it. And fast forward 2 years, I was leaving school at 16, 17, off to uni and studying music. So that's really how I started. A lot of people have a story of them starting when they're really young, drumming on pots and pans and things, but that was never really me. I never really showed a lot of interest, to be honest, but as I say, as soon as I started, I just loved it.
So what music did you listen to before you started playing drums?
Do you know, again, I don't really have many memories other than kind of Michael Jackson, listening to that kind of thing. I loved Michael Jackson. He would have probably loved me as well, actually, wouldn't he, back then?
Why can you moonwalk? Oh, right, yeah, I get that. Yeah. I was going to say, can you moonwalk?
Yeah.
No, but I can sprint.
Yeah, I'd have needed to, wouldn't I? But yeah, so make a quick
Set
getaway.
the tone nicely there for this evening.
But no, I love Michael Jackson. Oh, do you remember Fine Young Cannibals?
Yeah.
Do you remember that band? She
Drives Me Crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was literally obsessed with that song. And you know, when I listen back to it now, I really love it, and I love like the snare sound, that 80s sort of crack. So maybe that was sort of the first signs that I loved drums. I don't know, but yeah, so that was it really. And then as soon as I started playing drums, it really lit a fire in my dad as well, actually, who's my biggest supporter and always has been, really. And my mum too, but mainly my dad. And suddenly, at the age of 14, my dad would tell me all about his favourite bands, and I learnt about the fact he went to see like Jimi Hendrix at the Isle of Wight Festival, and all these different stories from these great bands. And one day we found ourselves in HMV, and he took me over to the rock aisle and sort of handed over Led Zeppelin BBC sessions and was like, "Listen to that, son." And that kind of like just changed my life, really, listening to Led Zeppelin And then Led Zeppelin 2, I remember getting for Christmas, and hearing Ramble On was just like, unbelievable. I was up all night listening to that song till about 3 or 4 in the morning, just having it on loop. So loved Zeppelin, loved Metallica, loved all those sorts of bands. Any band with drums in, really, like I fell in love with. So yeah, that was me. And then finished studying 3 years later from the ACM, left there with a HND and degree in music performance. Fat a lot
So
of
does
good
that does
did
that
me.
mean once you get the degree like that, does that mean you can work in McDonald's?
Exactly. That's, yeah. You're primed, ready for shelf stacking, really. No, it's great fun. It was great fun. But yeah, so started teaching and started playing in bands, and met Lee a few years later with our first band, The Longest Stay, which we sort of were in that band together. And then, as these things normally work out over the years, you meet different people. Fast forward another 10 years, and then I get a call one day from Lee Williams saying, "Oh, this chap, one of my customers at Absolute, called Phil Walker." I was like, I've never Phil Walker.
Never heard of her.
Who's she? And he's in this amazing show called The Story of Guitar Heroes, and yeah, he's looking for a new guitar player and drummer. What do you think? I was like, sign me up. And we've never looked back. So yeah, that's my brief.
You hadn't met him at that point, though. So we had another rethink later, didn't we?
Yeah. Couldn't back out at that point.
Unfortunately, you signed
yeah,
a contract. You're still here for another 30 years, is it? Now?
Yeah.
27 to go.
And a
Exactly.
deal with the devil.
Oh, blimey. Yeah. Well, yeah. I remember meeting. Well, obviously, everybody knows that. I shop at Absolute Music, and that's where I met Lee many years ago. And I think what I was doing is when I worked for Line 6. I was doing some sort of demo thing in store, and Lee said, he said, "Oh, I've got to go around about 4 o'clock because I've got a gig with my band tonight." And obviously I didn't know you're in a band, and then I started stalking him and on the old interweb and find out about the generations and what have you. And then band members come and go. And yeah, that's like I say, we had a meeting in a pub in Dorchester, didn't we?
Yeah.
When we could go to the pubs.
Oh,
And
those were the
and yeah,
days.
like you say, rest is kind of history. Well, it's nice to have you on board, Alan. It is nice to have you. Joking aside, it's nice to have you on this podcast as well. You probably won't be on again, but it's nice to have you this time.
Well, thanks for having me, chaps. I'm very pleased to be here, and I love
pleasure.
being in the band. I've got to say, it's the coolest show, project, band I've ever been in. The things we get to do, the things we've done in the 2 years I've been in the show already have been absolutely awesome. We've been the length and breadth of the UK, Scotland, Ireland, England, haven't we, chaps?
We have.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing. So hopefully we can get back on the road again soon, eh?
Well, when we do get back on the road, it's going to be quite interesting. A few things have changed, and it's going to be onwards and upwards in a big way, I do believe. Which I'm not going to say too much. I will say more as it develops, and probably podcast number 30 will be. But yeah, it's all onwards and upwards, and everything. Well, life's a progression, isn't it? So I like to think the show is that's about 6 years. Well, by the time we get back on the road, it'll be our 7th year. And I think every year's got better and better. It's got stronger, and musicians aren't very good at complimenting one another. You know, they tend not to do that. I've found, if you get a slight grin or a bit of a head nod, then you go, "Wow, he must really like that," you know. But I do have to say, guys, I feel really, really lucky to have found you lot. I really do. And that's as emotional as it gets, and I'm going to have a drink of port now.
Cheers, mate.
God.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Except Chris. Chris hasn't done a gig yet. You've yet to prove yourself.
Yeah, I know.
But as we're on to Chris, tell us your name, where you're from, and
I'm Chris. And
Excellent.
similar to you, Al, I started quite late actually. You hear stories of guitar players picking up the guitar like at the age of 4 or something and become prodigies and stuff. But I was about the same age as you, Al, about 13 or so. Grew up in North London in Tottenham. Grew into a family that was actually very musical. My brother played, and my dad sung and played in bands as well. around London circuits, pub circuits, and actually was involved in a staging company that worked with large touring bands like the Eagles, Mick Hucknall, Simply Red, Whitney Houston, huge acts, and would put stages on at Wembley and places like that. And so there was always all these stories going on, and always introduced to new records and things. And it was when I think I moved to Weymouth. I was about 13 or so, 13 or 14. I just decided to give this thing a go. My dad had a lovely 62 Strat at the time, and
Ooh.
yes,
Wow.
Al, that's a guitar.
That's a guitar.
That's an instrument.
So that's
Yeah.
Tell you what, Chris's story about how he started is, frankly, weeing all over mine, isn't it? There's me drumming away in English, and he's at Wembley.
No, these are all my dad's stories. To be honest, I just kind of grew up hearing all of this stuff, and and just one day I just thought, do you know what? I'll give the guitar a go. My dad played, and it was something that kind of brought us closer together. If anything, he was away working a lot when I was a kid, so it kind of we became very close, and it was something we shared together as a father-son thing. And actually later on started performing as an acoustic duo together, playing a lot of music from The Who. It was my dad's very into like the mod scene, the Jam, Secret Affair, those kind of groups. And and as my interest peaked with the guitar, like I was like given records from likes of David Bowie, Peter Frampton, who still remains to be my favorite guitar hero of all time. It was mentioned in the last podcast. I could never seem to I just seem to grow more and more fond of that album, Frampton Comes Alive, the more I listen to it. And
I need to get that on vinyl, actually.
Yeah, I've got it on CD too. It's not quite the same. I love all the crackles and everything. It's just, but that's how I remember hearing it as a kid. So hearing that now, it's like, it's nostalgic in some way. But
what we should do, guys? I know it's been a bit of a funny old year, financially for everybody. Well, the whole world. But what we should do at Christmas, we should buy each other an album. We should do like a secret Santa, and maybe buy each other an album that we think each one of us would appreciate. I think that would be quite cool.
Yeah,
that'd be great actually.
And then the whole podcast should be just playing the album, and then we can go to the pub.
So we've got to try and find an album that the other one hasn't heard of before, maybe.
Well,
or
possibly.
hasn't heard. Or...
I mean, you could be aware of the album that's out there, but never really heard it before. And you have to kind of take the opportunity to really get stuck in and really listen to it. And
it should be a secret Santa, though, shouldn't it? So like, we've only got one album to buy. And I'm going to have to start going through the charity shops now, I think, for you guys. But yeah, I think that'd be quite cool with that.
You guys are going to get a Now CD. That's what I'm going to get you.
I don't want a CD. I want vinyl.
Vinyl.
It's got to be vinyl for me and Chris.
I haven't got a record player though.
That's not my problem. Yeah. I hope I actually get Chris as a secret Santa, because I really want that Peter Frampton album. Oh dear. Carry on, Chris. Don't let us interrupt.
No, but as I mentioned, I just all my life been surrounded by music naturally, and so interest grew with the guitar. I decided to study, got a degree in music, which I was hoping to eventually move into teaching with, but that never really worked out. As soon as you end up on stage doing a gig, it's like, I'm just going to do this. I think this is pretty good. And like, I don't really know anything else. It's all I know how to do is play this thing.
Chris,
6 strings on a piece of wood.
What was your first guitar you ever got?
Oh, that was a vintage. It was a black Les Paul. I wanted like the Peter Frampton model with the 3 humbuckers. It was the closest I could get, and that was from Rock and Pop in Weymouth. John Story owned that at the time. But yeah, great guitar. I absolutely loved that. Amazing. And it was a year or so passed, and it came around to my birthday, and I remember my parents bought me a little Marshall amp. I was just over the moon. I was like, I can't believe I got a Marshall amp. I got like this Les Paul thing, and
I think everybody remembers their first Marshall, don't they?
I don't.
That
I had
moment
one.
when you get the first Marshall, was like, I've made it.
I remember I went into my room. My dad had covered, put it by the side of my bed and pulled my duvet cover over the top of it. And so I couldn't really see it at first, and then kind of revealed it. And I was like, "Oh my god!" And then just door closed, and you ain't seen me for a few years. It's just, But
Oh,
yeah,
brilliant.
but yeah, absolutely love just love music and playing guitar and it's yeah, at a young age I just well, as soon as I picked up the guitar, I say young age, it's still 13, still young, right? I knew this is what I was going to do for a living, and yeah, and I've done everything I can to make that happen. And now here with you guys, and
And you've wound up
I feel-
here, so it's gone well, Chris.
it's going well. It's going very well.
Yeah, Chris has joined the show right at the point where there's a pandemic and we can't work.
Yeah.
Since Chris joined the show, everything's gone downhill. I don't understand it. Dude, what
That seems
about
to have that
you,
effect.
Lee?
Yeah, well, I started playing guitar when I was, I think, 11. But at that point, I'd already been
2010
performing.
then.
Sorry.
2010.
Good job, buddy. You can.
Yeah, I'd already been on stage doing like amateur dramatics and school productions, that kind of thing, from around the age of 8. I think I was probably just encouraged into that by my mum because I was somewhat of a show off and needed to be center of attention. So that was just a good outlet for that. I remember going to middle school and being given the option to start learning an instrument, which I was really keen to do. But for some reason, I jumped into playing the trumpet, which didn't really pan out that well. I played it for like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And to be honest, after the initial novelty of it wore off, it kind of gathered dust and I just didn't progress with it. But I had friends around me who were getting into rock music and playing guitar. And once I saw that happening, I knew I needed to jump over there and get involved in that world. So I had an uncle who loaned me an acoustic guitar for a while, which was really cool. He drew me up some chords and got me on the right track. But then I remember getting my first guitar, and it was a £6 nylon
Is that the most you've ever spent on a guitar, Lee?
Yeah, it was. I think it
And
was
you still got it.
best guitar I've ever had. That one. Yeah, I think we paid £6 for it. It was a 3 or 4 string nylon strung guitar. And I just got obsessed. I think I've got one of those minds that I'm just really kind of pernickety when I get into something.
I like that pernickety.
It's a good
I
word.
love that word.
Word
Word
of
of the day.
Word of the day. There you go. Yeah, when I get into something, I just really get into it. I get obsessed with it, and that's just what happened with guitar through my teenage years. Perfect time to be learning an instrument. Got all the free time in the world, and your mind is a sponge. So I can remember doing the cliche thing of putting in 8 hours a day at the weekend just to learn new chops and learn new songs. But it didn't feel unnatural because, as I've said before, and I'll say again, I was very lucky to have this group of friends around me that were all musicians. So it felt like normality. We didn't play football. We didn't play video games. If you weren't in a band, something was wrong. So in our free time, we were learning songs, writing songs, recording songs on little tape decks, and then eventually putting on gigs. They weren't very glamorous gigs, but a gig's a gig. It was a case of getting your friends and family to come along and watch you at the local village hall playing, Nirvana covers and Green Day covers and that sort of thing. But it kept us moving forward until we hit that age, probably 16, 17, arguably too young to be in a pub. But we were at an age where we could go into the pubs and start earning some money. And that's really point of no return. Once you get that first paycheck, however big or small it might be, very hard to look back now because you're not going to go and get a summer job or a weekend job like other people at school were doing when you can go to the pub and earn some cash that's then going to fuel other projects. But all the while, that obsessive part of me just constantly chipping away at chasing down the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and trying to learn as much as possible, but knowing ultimately that you'll never get there.
I think that's the
And
beauty
the more
of it, isn't
experience
it?
you get, the more there is to learn, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I guess that sums up art in general. Like, you can work your entire life at it, but you'll never be perfect. It will never be perfect because perfection doesn't really exist. And I guess that's what makes it so appealing. But anyway, yeah, at that sort of age, I was finishing up at school as well. Never really got masses of encouragement from school because it kind of felt like if you didn't play jazz guitar or classical guitar, you didn't really get priority. Having said that, I did get encouraged into the sixth form jazz band, like the big band thing, which was cool. At the time, I probably didn't appreciate it as much as I should have. But looking back now, it forced me into a new world of stronger music theory based playing, and just a different approach that I hadn't experienced at that point in my band endeavors out of school. But
I find a lot of all girls schools are like that. Yeah.
I think a lot of schools are actually like that in general. I hope that that's something that has changed these days. I've not been in school for a number of years now, but maybe you guys as educators working in schools, maybe you could tell me.
No,
Yeah, I
things
think
are
education in schools has definitely improved a lot. There is, the options now to learn drums, guitar, and bass in most schools. I think it's great. There's so much open to kids nowadays, and there's so the drama. There's just so much, and outside of school activities and things. But obviously, Al, you're a busy drum teacher at the moment, aren't you? You're
I
working
am.
a couple of days at the moment, a couple of
Yes,
schools in
mate.
Paul.
I'm very, very thankful that just, even with COVID, I've managed to get back to school in September, which made me feel a little bit more like me again after, like many musicians, 6 months in the abyss of doing nothing really. But yeah, I've gone from teaching 60 students or so a week now down to 20 or 25, something like that. But I still feel very thankful for that. But yeah, I think music lessons in school is like more accessible than ever, really. Luckily, Lee, there's nothing like that in our school,
That's
certainly.
good.
But
good.
I do know the sort of things you mean. There was often caveats which came
Yeah.
along with doing things, wasn't there? But I mean, back in the day, you could only learn music really, like especially cool instruments like we play in secondary school. But nowadays you can go, you can do drum lessons in infant school, junior school, right up to secondary school. I mean, some of the kids I start teaching at year 7, they've already been playing for about 5-6 years or something.
Wow.
They got kits and all sorts. Obviously, kits are a little bit more accessible and things. So, and of course, YouTube. I mean, God, YouTube and social media has just revolutionized the game, hasn't it? Really. I mean, I still feel young at heart, but I'm constantly reminded by kids how old I am when they ask me my age, and I'm like 35, and they look absolutely revolted, like I'm an old man. But I don't feel that old. But then when I think back, I was buying VHS videos like Starlicks. Did you guys have
Yeah,
Starlicks?
well, I had
Absolutely.
one of the things I had was a Paul Gilbert Rock Licks or something. I
Yeah.
can't remember what it was called.
Well,
I
I
had
used
the
to buy.
Albert Lee and Brian May Starlicks one.
Did you? Amazing.
Yeah.
See, even a fan back then of Albert Lee and Brian, were you, Phil?
Well, it's funny you say about schools and what have you. Actually, for my GCSE music, which I've got to be completely honest with, the music department in my school was absolute tosh. It was classical or Get Out.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a private guitar teacher, Steve Walker, who's a great player. And for my GCSE, he came up and we went into the exam room, if you like, and we did Country Boy by Albert Lee. He did the rhythm part and I did the lead parts, and then we swapped and things like that. And I think on the report afterwards came back as something like, "What a load of electric nonsense." Do you know what I mean? And I'm just like, well, I mean, to be fair, I can't read a note of music, and if that's what comes of it, I'm glad.
I know
I'm
exactly.
just going to rewind back there a little bit, Phil.
Experiences.
Sorry, Country Boy in GCSE.
Yeah.
How long you been
Yeah,
playing for, Phil?
Well, I started really, really early. I started when I was 6. My dad was a guitar player in the 60s, and he got rid of his guitar to marry my mum, and didn't play for years and years. And when my granddad died, and my grandma had a bit of money, and she said, "For my dad's birthday, I'm going to get you a guitar. If you want to start playing again." And so he got a guitar, and I probably took it off him, and I never gave him it back. And so I was about 6 years old, and then just Eddie Cochran, Hank Marvin. That's all I listened to. Dire Straits, and then at 11 years old, put a band together and did a gig. Did a gig that Christmas when I was 11, with this very guitar that I've got now, with my number one Strat. So I was 11 years old when I got it. And yeah, we did a gig. I think we did about 5 songs in this working men's club, and that was it. It's, you know, hooked all the way. And me and my dad was a duo. Then we were a band, and it progressed. Years and years down the line till I'm here. So
Wow.
yeah, I haven't really. The only other job I've actually ever had was for 6 months. I drove a lorry for a window company, which was good because sometimes in this business I've had to drive a lorry for, you know, carrying PA around and things like that. So that came in handy, I guess. But yeah, it's been music all of my life since I was 6 years old, and I do not want it to be any different.
That's amazing. I think the difficult point for any musician comes not when they start playing. Obviously, you have your difficulties in learning the instrument, but the difficult part comes when you leave school. I think if you learn at a young age, that's the point at which you tend to see people drop by the wayside, because obviously that old saying, life gets in the way, doesn't it? So I think anyone who's able to transition, however long that takes, if you can make it from the point where you are that really keen amateur teenager in their bedroom playing, you know, chops all day long and learning, but if you can make that transition through those first few years and get to a point where you're now getting some traction in a professional sense, I think that is the biggest hurdle. Once you're over that and once you find your feet, you're going to have difficulties, but you're now in the adult world and you're like, I'm a musician now. Whereas I think we lose so many people there.
You do. I a lot of it, I think, comes down to support. I think, like my parents, I have everything to thank for that. You know, they supported me with everything. You know, if I needed a guitar or something, like without them, I wouldn't be, you know, having this podcast with you guys.
Yeah.
So right now,
Same here.
So
I agree with that totally, Chris. I think it all comes down to money, unfortunately, doesn't it? You know,
a lot of the time, I mean,
the desire to get a normal job and things. That's when people often, unfortunately, have to give up the playing, because it is so hard to earn a living from playing, isn't it, guys? Let's be honest.
That's really interesting, Al, because I think you might might hit home with you more, because I find being diverse is really, really helpful. I mean, as you know, I've played drums since I was 13 as well. Sing, play bass, and you know, I don't want to sound like a jack of all type thing, but it has come in handy being able to do all these different things. You know, like I played drums for about 6 years in a theatre show that's been touring around, and sometimes a lot of the people were like, "Do you play guitar?" You didn't even know I played guitar, you know. And it is about being diverse and getting out there and not being a one-trick pony, if you like, because if you find the guy that my mum and dad, I've got to thank for that, because I didn't want to sing and they bought me a mic and they made me sing, and it was I didn't want to do it. You know, I've never had any training, I've never had a lesson in my life. I probably should have, but they forced me into singing, and I'm so glad they did, because I know so many guitar players out there that would have got the gig had they been able to sing.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally right, mate. I think that's my biggest advice, and I feel a little bit of a hypocrite saying it to my students, because I can't play anything else. I can't sing for love nor money. I've tried to learn other instruments, but they just don't click with me. And going back to what you were saying, Lee, with the trumpet, it just didn't light a fire in you. And I've had similar things with everything. I don't really feel like I'm a musician. I just feel like this thing, like
we feel the same, Al.
Yeah, I do. I'm glad you can admit that.
Yeah, honestly, I approach drums like
hold
a
on
sport,
though.
really.
Hold on, you're pretty good on the ukulele. These
Oh,
days,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Come to a guitar show, guys, and you'll see what they're talking about. But yeah, so where was I? Yeah, I don't really feel like, well, this for me is like the only thing that's ever made sense with music. However, with all my students, when they say, you know, what advice have you got? It would be learn another instrument, especially singing. If you're a guitar player who can sing, a drummer who can offer some BVs, bass player, you've immediately doubled your sort of employability, if that's the right word. You know, I couldn't agree anymore, Phil, to offer BVs. I mean, we know from our show, for a start off, like Lee and Chris, both capable of BVs, both capable of lead vocals as well. And what an amazing thing that is. If another guitar player was available but could not sing for love nor money, they just wouldn't get the gig. Would you agree,
right.
Phil?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's
absolutely.
as simple as that.
We're a big show. that goes out, and there's only 4 people on stage, and you've got to be, pretty special to sort of make. I'm not this, we're not the Foo Fighters or anything. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say anything like that, but we're
Not yet.
not yet. Yeah, not yet. Yeah, there. But yeah, you've got to be able to bring a lot to the table. You know what I mean? To do this, pure, not because we've got egos or anything like that. We're far from it, us lot, trust me. But it is about, there's 4 people on stage. People are paying a lot of money for a ticket. We really have to bring it home every night, and we have to give as much as we can because there are 4 people on stage. And I really, really love getting emails from people saying what a massive sound you've got, and what a full sound, it sounds so accurate, and all the, and I do get things like that through, and it makes me think, it's going right. That's what we want, It's so, yeah. The more you can bring, the better, especially port.
I think that kind of plays a little bit into what we were talking about last time in episode 2, making that transition between an amateur or a hobby, and then when you decide it's something that you want to do for your career. I think so many people struggle because music is a creative endeavor. Being organized and thorough doesn't necessarily come naturally to artistic people. So it feels very strange, and I'm sure this is probably an ongoing struggle at times for all of us, when you have to approach something that you love and something that's so creative in the moment, but you then have to do the work side of it, and you have to think of it in terms of, if you were applying for another job, you'd want to put your best foot forward, and you'd want to make yourself as employable as possible for that job. It seems to be that when you now talk in terms of music, those principles kind of move to the side, and people don't necessarily think like that, because it's a band, it's a gig, but it is a job. So if you were applying for a
it's
banking
the music
job,
business, isn't it?
Exactly, and it kind of sucks that you have to think like that, and nobody likes to dwell too much on that side of the job. But to ignore that side of the job is probably going to mean that you're not gonna work, or you're going to struggle, I think.
And that maybe opens up the other conversation, Lee, as well, about other important things that unfortunately a lot of creative people struggle with, like the timekeeping thing, and just being like, good attitude, and let's be honest, guys, we're only on stage for 2 hours a night, but you're with each other all the rest of the time, aren't you? Hanging out. So quite often just having the right attitude, all the other aspects that come into the business side of things needs to be there to help your employability, doesn't it, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you look at all the pieces of the puzzle, think of it like a pie chart. You've got a percentage of it is obviously your musical ability and your particular instrument, but then there's adaptability, and that probably covers other things you can bring to the table, so vocals, other instruments. But then there are all those other aspects which I just don't think get talked about enough, and that would be timekeeping, your personality, and how easy you are, how flexible, how dependable, how reliable. Yes. And it's a shame to see fantastic musicians put so much attention on just that section of the pie that is the music side of it, but then, oh, you didn't turn up for the gig, or oh, you haven't got a car, you can't get to the gig, or you don't sing, and therefore, it's nice that you've put the work in, you've got your chops, but unfortunately we're gonna go with this guy because they're a more complete package, I guess.
Yeah, that being obviously the guitar show, we've employed a lot of people over the years, and that has been one of my biggest things. It's not about playing. Because most people that come into this show have to be a certain standard of player. You can't just be like, oh yeah, I can get away with this. There's no getting away with it in this show. You have to be A-game top player, But it's not that gets you the gig. It's what sort of person are you? Because right. I'm sorry, I'm going to be quite blunt now. I'm not going to mention any names. Obviously, we've had lots and lots of people come through this show.
Oh, go on.
And no, I'm not going to mention any names. I won't do that. But some guys, I think, oh, you're an amazing player, but you're a dick. I'm sorry, but and people can't work with other people like that, because, like, you're right, Al. When we go out on the road, there's like 6-7 people at least, and all it takes is one person just to upset the apple cart, and
Definitely.
it puts a bad atmosphere, and you don't do as good a show as possible. And I'm quite strict about that now. If you're the slightest bit of a diva or an ego or a dick, then I'm sorry, there's no room for you on the road with us, you know. And then I do feel lucky that we have got the people that we've got now, because I think everybody, well, we're doing this podcast for a start.
Yeah.
Everybody gets on, and that is probably more important than the plane in some respects, because it's your family on the road. You are family, you know.
I think that's so important. I think it's really interesting, and it's easily forgotten when you're a viewer of, you know, live music or anything, and you don't necessarily consider everything that's happened leading up to the show. You go in. I'm speaking from personal experience. If I go to a gig, I watch the band, I judge the band, and I think, yeah, that was a great night, or I would have done this differently, or whatever. But you're not necessarily considering everything that's led up to that hour on stage or 2 hours. And it's a very hard thing to measure. But for you, Phil, as the owner of the show, all of those aspects, just like individual musicality and, you know, song choices and directorial choices that you make in the show, they're all important. But also the dynamic of everything leading up to that gig can be, what do we reckon, maybe a 20-30% difference in how good the show is.
I think.
Would you agree?
I do agree. However, I think being a professional, like you say, the audience wouldn't know either way. You know, you might be on stage, and you might look across at your bandmate or whatever, you know, and you're giving it all the big licks on the guitar, going, "Oh, we love each other," and then you're going, "I hate you," like, but nobody.
So that's why you make that face at me.
That's
then,
it.
Phil.
That's it, Al. Yeah. I do it to you a lot. Yeah. No, that's being a professional. That's show business. And you know, there have been a few instances, but luckily not in this show, that you know, you do actually go on stage in a mood, you know, but being the professional, nobody knows that.
No, I think
you know,
actually, I think you're right. And maybe what I'm thinking is, it's very easy to think about your own feelings and imagine that everybody watching is aware of that. And I would hope actually that enough rehearsing and having all those kind of boxes ticked means that when we have those days that are up and down, the show itself isn't affected. Maybe what I'm thinking more is, in your head, you tend to think, we've all come off stage, and if we've had a bad day, our tendency is to come off stage and go, "Oh no, we had a bad gig." And actually, if you see it back, normally it's like, "Oh."
It's funny though, isn't it, when you say, "Oh, we had a bad gig," and you think, "Well, what was bad about it?" I didn't change my jacket as quick as I normally do. Do you know what I mean? When you sort of get up to a certain level, the bad things, that happen are usually out of your control. You know, like something might go wrong technically, or there might be a power cut. We've been there when that's happened, and you know, "Oh, that was a bad gig." No, it wasn't a bad gig. It was something happened out of your control that, you know, made it a bit awkward.
Yeah.
And sometimes, guys, I've had amazing gigs, some of the best gigs I've ever played, and the day leading up to that gig, I felt absolutely like awful. Maybe I've been a bit ill or a bit poorly, or I've got a terrible cold, and I'm dreading the gig to come. And then it's amazing. Like I don't know if you guys have had
nothing
similar
worse.
things.
Being a musician having cold is worse than a normal person having cold, because I tell you what, you talk about man flu, it's terrible.
I suppose the best example of what we're talking about here is the fact that we can all come off stage and you can all have an entirely different opinion of that show. You know what I mean? When we've come off stage and like one of us is like, "That was amazing, we nailed it tonight," and someone else will be like, "You know, this bit we could have done that," and someone else might be indifferent, and then you could have the next night be completely different.
Absolutely.
And probably if you asked a member of the audience, they wouldn't have picked up on any of that. But I guess that's
and like you're absolutely right. Everybody has their own gig on stage, don't they? You know, there's one night where Lee might go, "Oh, my monitors are not quite right." I might go, "Yeah, I'm not feeling the guitar sound right." Or, you know, Chris would be like, "Yeah, there's something not going on right there." And Al would go, "Drums." And that was a big build-up for a load of rubbish. That
right,
The
chaps.
funny thing is, I knew it was coming.
Us three. So, Chris, I've got an idea, and I'm going to put this to
Okay.
you live on air because I've said it in episode 2. I'm talking
your
over
trousers.
you. We're all talking over you. So I'm coming up with this. Chris's Corner, okay? Chris's
Corner.
Chris's Corner is a safe space for a few minutes where you can have your say on something and we're not allowed to interrupt.
Do you know,
Okay?
I'm watching this on the screen. I'm like, I'm really enjoying this podcast. This is great. I'm like a viewer.
Yeah, shame. I wish I was part of it. Oh,
Oh, wait a minute.
So Chris's corner, are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
It better be good. First one. Here we go.
you
Over
put
to
him on the
Chris's-
spot. Hang on a minute.
Oh,
he
God,
doesn't
I
even
don't
know what
like
he's
being
going
put
to
on this.
talk about.
I
Okay,
wanted
Chris,
to do it.
completely uninterrupted. You don't know what you're going to talk about. I hope it's good. Are you ready,
Phil,
Chris?
I'm looking at you. No interruptions, all right? No interruptions.
Yeah, over to you, Chris.
Are you going to ask
Well,
me
that
a
was
question
great.
or
That
what?
went really well. That did, didn't it?
I feel
It's
like
not
I'm
like
waiting
a-
for something.
It's like a mindfulness moment. It's not like just peace and quiet. It's like,
We'll come up with a
No.
jingle, Chris. We'll come up with a Chris's
We'll come
Corner
with-
jingle, something for you in
Yeah.
future episodes.
Do a Ricky Gervais. Oh, Champesy that.
Do you need a minute to think of something, Chris? Okay, well, I'll tell you what, Chris. Hang on. We'll give you a second to give you a Chris's Corner. We're going to add another new segment to the show.
Hey,
And
I guess what we could do, guys, is have we kind of wrapped up that section before? Maybe we could just summarise that and say, you know, for all you aspiring budding musicians out there, just to summarise, learn some other instruments, say yes to everything, be a cool person.
Well, I think you've just said it. We're live on air now.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
No,
Okay.
it's a good point. It's a good
Yeah,
point.
I'd say yes to most things. I mean, Al, you've got to be a bit careful there. I mean, I once wrote to Jim on Fix It, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. There was that one time in Thailand I said yes to everything, and that I ended up in
That
trouble.
explains the limp then, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they're good points. They're good points. One thing I was going to add in amongst all that, because that was a long tangent we went on there, but I think there was hopefully some useful
Some
information
good stuff.
in there.
There's good stuff in there.
You mentioned about having parents supporting you. If you've got that, then that is great. That is a situation to make the most of. But if you haven't necessarily got that, I don't think it is the end of the world. What I would say on that subject is a support network in general, and that can come from your family, but it can also come from friends and peers and colleagues.
Of course.
And one piece of advice I always gave people, because I used to get asked at the shop a lot, like how you progress, how you get in bands, how you get gigs, is just meet people, put yourself out there. And I think this is an example of that. Phil, you said about you looking at Alan and I in the band, and that was through our conversations in the shop. I'd actively engage with people at the shop, and actually Chris as well. Our relationship started. You were another customer of mine in the shop, and you were engaging with me because you're a musician putting yourself out there, wanting to tell me about your work, and I was doing the same to you. And you do that enough, and that's where your work is going to come from, and that's where your bands and your projects are going to come from. They're not just going to come out of thin air. They're going to come through conversations, meeting other people, and just kind of positively engaging with other musicians, whatever level they're at. They could be complete amateurs who've just been playing for 6 months, but they might get a gig in a year's time and they might remember that conversation. I'm sure we've all got examples of that as well, where you've bumped into someone and then you've planted a little seed, and 2 years later they've phoned you up and gone, remember that conversation we had? I've got a gig coming up. Are you up for jamming? Or, and off you go. You're into something new. That's how all of my musical experiences have come about, I think, really, because there's no job board as such. So that's just a little footnote to that kind of section.
Network.
Another
the
thing
network.
as well, this
is so
happened to me
important.
as I was playing in bands, because obviously I started so young, is that if you're an older musician and, a young kid comes along, don't think, oh, cocky little, ain't playing in my band. Give the kid a chance, because thanks to a lot of older musicians, because at the time, and it's just flipped the other way around now, but at the time I was always the youngest in a band. And, I thank all those older guys that gave me a chance. It gave me
good
great
point.
experience. So give the young kid a chance.
You're listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast.
We've got a new section. Yes. Okay. Cue the music.
Just to
Okay.
explain. No, just
Oh, I'll tell you what, actually, Let's use a drum fill to take us into the next.
guys, we should just explain as well that Phil's actually prepared his own jingle for this part. He sent it to me,
right.
so you will get to hear it there.
Oh, right.
in
Do
the
you want
finished
to
article.
hear it? Do you want to hear it? Or should we surprise them?
Yeah.
No,
Actually,
listen to the
let me
finished
wait
thing.
for it. Let me wait for it.
Listen to
Okay,
I'll
we'll
stick it
wait
in the
for it.
finished edit.
Oh,
So
okay, so let's do that bit again then. Shall we? Go
right,
on,
so
Lee, do
new
that bit again.
section. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for Phil's rant.
Cue the music. Phil's rant. Phil's rant. Okay, so the guys in the show know that I can tend to go off on one a little bit, and it doesn't have to be about anything important. I could go off on one for hours about nothing, But there's certain things that really grind my gears. All right, and one thing is, I did a gig with a friend of mine. I haven't done a gig with him for a long time, but believe it or not, it was in October, and no, it was beginning of November. Sorry, and right at the beginning of November, before lockdown, we did a Warner's gig, and it was a Monday night. It was nice to do it, and I said, "Can I use your guitar?" Obviously, I took my 335, and it's an acoustic gig as well. So I was doing acoustic guitar work, and this friend of mine had just bought a Gibson J45 Deluxe Custom Shop, and I said, "Do you mind if I use yours? Because I love Gibson J45s, and I love Gibson. Let that be known right from the start. I'm a massive Gibson fan. I've got
Gibson
3
guitars.
Gibson guitars." And I took this guitar out of the case, and it looked fantastic. And I nearly had a slight crisis as I took it out of the case. It was beautiful. And I played it, and the frets were shocking. I couldn't believe it. And I've recently just bought a new Gibson. I've bought a 60s 335 model, and everything about that guitar is perfect. It's a 2018. It's perfect. It plays beautiful. It sounds really nice. Why can't Gibson be consistent? I mean, this is a J45. It's a custom shop guitar, and the frets were awful. They had they were sharp. I've got to be honest. I'm going to put my neck on the line here and say it's the nicest acoustic guitar, sound-wise, I've ever heard and ever played. I'm going to get one because I just, but I am prepared that I'm going to have fretwork done. And why can't Gibson get it together? Why can't you be just, the same for every guitar? I've got an SG, which is absolute toilet. It's rubbish, and I've had to have loads of work done to it. It's so frustrating. And then I get a 335 that's beautiful and absolutely nothing needs doing to it. It's an absolute corker. Why can't you get it together, Gibson? What
I
is
think
that about?
we should pose that question to Al, because he's our guest
Wow.
for this evening. So, Alan, why can't Gibson get it together?
No, but Al, I mean, being a drummer, you
Well-
must have bought something that you've always wanted, maybe a snare or a triangle or cowbell or something like that. and you must get it home and go, oh, why have I just wasted £3 on this drum? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Well, gear, even big names get it wrong, don't they? But yeah, it's funny that a company like that consistently get it wrong. But hearing Lee over the years when he was working at Absolute, bemoaning the many weird things that these great guitar companies seem to do, the strange things they decide baffles me. I mean, I must say, from a drum perspective, most companies get it right consistently, and there seems to definitely be a bit more of a drum community, not only amongst drummers but manufacturers as well. I don't know if that's just my experience. Maybe somebody who's a little bit more on the other side might know, but yeah, I'm afraid I can't offer any insights into the Gibson thing, guys. You're on your own there.
It is frustrating because in my experience, it always seems to be just the quality control, just the final part. It's not like they're making something hideously wrong. They've been doing this for decades, but it seems that the peaks and troughs in the quality of these guitars, and maybe the reason why the reviews do tend to fluctuate, it's just that final part of the process. It's just the quality control. You make a fantastic guitar that's going to hit the shelves for like £2,000-3,000, and then you forget to take sawdust out of the case, or you forget to just file that last fret, or the setup is terrible. That always shocked me, that guitars at that level would come to a shop and the setups would be awful, like they've not been touched. They sell them as though they're supposed to come out the case ready to play, and there are very, very few manufacturers that is actually the case. It's normally that you need to spend an hour or two on this guitar to then get it into a condition that is saleable, really, because the setup, I've seen it many times, the setup is what is going to sell the guitar. If you can't engage with that guitar, if the setup is awful, then you're going to pick that up and play it and judge it and think, this is a naff guitar. If you can put
Lee,
a good setup, yeah, go for it.
Can I interrupt there? Your opinion from your days as guitar shop manager at Absolute, give us the companies that consistently got it wrong or the ones that were really good.
Well, we're trying for Gibson sponsorship here, so I should maybe bite my tongue a little bit. But no, look, Gibson's history is checkered, particularly over the last decade or so. They've had ups and downs, and like most things, they've had good and bad eras. Fender had, ups and downs as well, and they've had eras that some people are not so fond of, and others that seem to be, almost godlike in their production. But Gibson, unfortunately, were that brand that were consistently inconsistent. Their quality control seemed to be so variable, and you could get a guitar that would be £500 or £600 and it wouldn't have an issue at all. But then you could get a guitar that was £3,000 or £4,000 and it would turn up with sawdust, or it would turn up with a string missing, or it would turn up with the keys to the case missing. Like, just silly little things. That's what I'm saying. It's not like you don't know how to build a guitar, or you're using the wrong woods, or blah, blah, blah. It was like, this the finishing touches. And on the flip side of that, the brand that sticks in my mind for getting it right consistently is PRS.
I thought you'd say that.
Whether you like their guitars or not, they're exceptionally made, and their quality control is just world class. There are many, many cases out there of evidence where if the guitar didn't meet a certain standard, it would just go straight back through the bandsaw and it would be put into recycling, and it would never leave the factory floor.
Well, do you know what? When you mentioned PRS there, Lee, I couldn't agree with you more. When I worked for Line 6, we had a new PA system out, and we actually did a gig with Paul Reed Smith. We supplied all the sound, and I actually did.
Oh, wow.
No pressure, but I did front of house sound for Paul Reed Smith.
Oh, wow.
And Simon McBride. So
amazing.
There was no pressure, but that's when I lost most of my hair. And it was. The guy is just, he can hear things, that the normal people can't. Even dolphins can't hear things that this guy can hear. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when he explains because we're on the desk, and he came to the back of the room with me, and he's going, "Oh no, try this," and he's making like 0.2 of a dB, on a certain frequency, and he's going, "That's it." I'm going, I have no idea what you're talking about. You know what I mean? But this guy obviously can hear something. And I've owned one Paul Reed Smith guitar in my life. I don't intend owning any more. Not for me. But I completely get the perfection. They are phenomenal guitars. I mean, even the nut on a Paul Reed Smith, the work that goes into one of these nuts, like Gibson just go, oh yeah, we'll just get a nut and we'll just file it down and we'll stick it in with a bit of super glue or whatever, or we'll nail it in, whatever. Quality control, there we go. He's drunk anyway, doesn't matter, let's send it out, all that type of thing. But this Paul Reed Smith is, it's fanatical about quality. And
I think it's in their company culture, as far as I can see. It's the environment that you create, as it comes from the top of the chain right the way down. This is probably true of any business, even bands. The environment you create will affect the final product. And with Paul and his company, it comes from the top down, and everyone, floor managers, the production, the distribution, the marketing, they're all aiming for the best. And the guitars would be set up multiple times before they leave the factory. The quality control is fantastic. You're certainly not going to find sawdust in the case.
Yeah.
And then when they land in their respective country of sale, so if they're being shipped to Europe or they're going overseas to maybe the Far East or wherever, they're then checked again, and their distribution is equally as tight as well, so that if anything has happened in transit, any damage, any breakages, or just setup tweaks, they're then looked at again before they hit the shop floor. So when they arrive, you open the case and we look at it and go, that's a saleable guitar. We have to do very, very little to it. if anything, and it's ready to go on the shelf.
There is only one downside to PRS though, guys. If you're on a gig and it falls off a music stand, it doesn't end too good, does it, Chris?
And there we go. We've got our topic for Chris's Corner. So over
Chris's
to
Corner.
Chris.
Come on, Chris.
So,
Tell us the story, Chris.
So Lee actually sold me a PRS many years ago,
And it wasn't
a
broken
PRS
when I sold it to you. I can assure you that.
No, it was pre-owned actually, but in absolute mint condition. It was a custom 24 USA. It was probably the most money I've ever spent on a guitar, but I think I come back like 3 times to try that guitar. I was like, I'm not sure. It was like a toss up between that and another PRS. I think there was like a 30th anniversary or something.
Yeah.
But
Lee does that buying an ice cream. He wants to make sure that his 89 pence has gone into a good cause, isn't it, Lee?
it's important. It's important. But I tell you what, it was probably it's probably the best guitar I've ever owned, just because it gave me confidence going into a gig, knowing it's going to sound awesome, it's going to hold its tuning, it looks the part, and it's so easy to play.
Yeah.
The only thing for me is I can't put my finger on it. When I pick up a Strat, I feel like I'm at home. You know, like it's just I can't tell you what that is, why I feel that way. It's just, and do you know what? I think I like the imperfections in guitars, searching for that one guitar, because the thing is, obviously with Gibson and Fender, you know, you got a variety of models that people, you know, cling to certain eras. Like some say like Gibsons, and you know, the 90s were probably one of the best eras or something. And but I think you're always on that hunt for that one Gibson because they're so inconsistent. It's like, oh, I found the one, and I don't know. I quite like that quest myself.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I was the same when I found my 335. I was the same when I found my Les Paul. And when I found my SG, I wanted to paddle down the river with it.
You're in a slightly strange situation, though, Phil, in that you have a guitar collection that some of which are real personal purchases, but many of them are serving a role in the show, aren't they? They're almost the cast of the show themselves. So
well, yeah, and that was the same with the SG. Had I have had more time, we decided to. We got so many. I think it was the first couple of years we've been out. We didn't put AC/DC in. And then we got so many requests for AC/DC, and you know it was getting painful. I got in so many emails. Where's Angus? You know, it's like, right, we really need to do AC/DC on the next leg of the tour. I think we'd broke for Christmas, and it was in that sort of 2 or 3 weeks over Christmas. We were back on the road in January, and I said, right, that's it. We've got to put it in, and nobody had an SG. I couldn't find one secondhand. Certainly not what I wanted. I wanted an SG standard. I wanted the block neck. I wanted a red one. And I couldn't find one apart from Coda Music. They had one in. And
Stevenage, aren't they?
Yes,
They're
that's
based.
right. Yeah. They had one in, and it was damaged, so they knocked quite a couple £100 off the price. So I drove up there from Weymouth, and I got the guitar, and I thought, oh, this isn't bad. And then I looked at the back of the headstock, and it had the stupid robotic tuners on there.
What they call the G-Force tuners or something.
Oh,
aren't they?
yeah, that's it. Chris,
Ridiculous.
what a waste of time. Honestly,
oh my God.
I put new strings on it, and I set it to tune itself, and the D string just kept winding and winding and winding till the motor went in the thing. And I was like,
Or the string
this
snaps,
is gigging
yeah.
in like 2 weeks' time. And you know, Coda said, yeah, no problem. It's under guarantee. We'll get one sent. When will it be sent? Oh, 3 to 4 weeks. I'm like, well, we're on the road in less than 2 weeks type thing, you know. So Robin Absolute just, he says these things are a load of toilet. So he took it off, and we put some Grovers on there. And I'm like, that's my experience of the 2015 Gibson
did
SG.
did anyone else spot there that Chris's Corner morphed into Phil's rant?
Oh, sorry, you never said that we'd changed it. I thought it had done. Yeah. I'm so sorry,
I know, but
Chris.
it led direction for something else, didn't it? Anyway, it's fine.
Oh, it's obviously
It's fine.
quite. It's you know, it's piercing my heart as this. You know, the old Gibson thing. Please get it.
I can see that
It is.
we've struck a chord there, pun intended.
Yeah.
Right, chaps.
tell you
My,
what,
my drink's running empty. I was going to say, I know this is the Guitar Heroes podcast, but maybe we should just, while we've got Al here, Al, we've been talking about guitars and about equipment. You own a number of drum kits. Why don't you give us a breakdown of your favourite drum kit that you own and tell us why and how you came to own it?
That's a big question. Well, if you want a complete studio tour, guys, I'd recommend you go onto the Guitar Heroes YouTube channel, which is Phil Walker Guitarist. Is that correct, Phil?
It is.
Or the Story of Guitar Heroes Facebook page, where you can see a studio tour of my little drum cave here, and you can hear all about the drum kits in depth. But just to answer Lee's question, I'll probably say for sentimentality, my Drum Workshop 7-piece DW kit over there in black velvet, that's probably my favorite kit. It's not really a kit I enjoy playing on much anymore. I've got it set up as a teaching kit in the studio, but the reason I don't enjoy it so much anymore is because I've sort of evolved as a player, and I kind of prefer playing more vintage, bigger sizes now, whereas that DW is fusion sizes, so that means it's smaller, punchier sounds. It's got a 20-inch kick, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So yeah, but the reason it's sentimental is because my parents bought that for me when I was fresh out of uni after doing a degree. And what were we saying earlier in the show, chaps, about parental support and all that?
Yeah.
I mean, that kit cost my mum and dad, you know, $3,000 at the time, and we're talking many years ago. And they, you know, we're very much a working class family with normal jobs, so that is a serious amount of money for my family. So, like many
amazing.
things, it
Absolutely
went
amazing.
on the credit card. Something like I kind of follow in their footsteps now with putting drum kits on. If in doubt, get out the credit card. So that's the DW. But you guys won't be able to see this, unfortunately, because we haven't got the video cameras. But I'm currently sat behind my 1970s Gretsch kit, and this is very much in player's condition, which basically in guitar terms means the strings are hanging off.
Knackered.
Knackered.
Crap.
Knackered is the tip. Yeah, crap.
Doesn't stay in
Ready
tune.
ready for the tip. But yeah, it means I don't take it out anywhere because it's fallen to bits. But in the
Thank God for
studio
that.
environment, yeah, in the studio environment, it just sounds lovely. It started its life back in the West End, which is a topic I cover in the studio tour video if you want to check it out.
Actually,
it
Al,
was on- yeah,
people
go on.
can hear and see that kit, because if you go onto Phil Walker Guitarist on YouTube, you'll see there's two lockdown videos, Sultans of Swing and Hammer to Fall with Brian May, and that's the kit that you're using.
Exactly, mate. Yeah, and I love recording. It's constantly set up. It never moves. It's really solid, consistent. It sounds great whether I'm playing rock, metal, or country. I've got a range of snare drums at the moment. I've got the Ludwig 400 on here, which is the most recorded snare in history. This is the sort of thing Gad was playing back in the day on like 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover and great tunes like that. But to summarise the drum kit segment of the show, guys, my favourite kit of all time is the kit you can see on stage with the Story of Guitar Heroes. It's my 1960s Ludwig Silver Sparkle, and as I say, vintage kits really speak to me. Chris, it's a bit like what you were saying, mate, about the Gibsons. Although they're annoying, you know, when you find that one and it connects with you, and it's same with me with vintage kits. Yeah, they're rickety, and I might be playing the floor tom and the leg drops on it, you know, and it ends up on the floor, but you just can't beat the feel of it. And anytime I play a new drum kit, it's like, oh, I just love old stuff.
And that is why I would never be a guitar manufacturer, because
Right.
how can you strive? Companies like PRS and
Yeah.
lots of modern brands that strive for perfection, they're always going to be fighting a battle against exactly that. That
Yes.
old stuff is cool, and things that have mojo and a story are always going to be cool, particularly to musicians, because so much of our influence is embedded in the past.
Yeah.
So it's always a tough line to toe, where you want to make the best thing that you can make for the modern day, but embrace that history.
Absolutely.
And I think that's just
I think that's why
forever.
Fender maybe haven't moved too far away from their design, because you know it's got that
It works.
attachment to
Yeah.
the 60s and 50s models, and with just some modern tweaks, you know, for the modern player playability, you know, different radiuses on the necks and things like that, different, you know, silent what are they called, the noiseless pickups,
Yeah.
you know, but it still has the aesthetic of, you know, the vintage models, and that's why I quite like them. And but you mentioned something, Al, as well. As you evolve as a musician, your taste does alter as well. And I find that the older I get, the more I kind of want to go towards more vintage models myself. when I
For
was
sure,
younger, I
man.
was always like, idolizing guys like Steve Vai on an Ibanez, and like I had a Jackson with like the shark teeth in the neck, and
Nice.
Yeah.
but now I'm like, I just want something cold that stinks, and just
Yeah.
What, like
Do
Phil?
you want some of my underpants? How would you like that, mate, Chris?
They're far too vintage. They are.
They certainly stink.
I tell you what, though, guys, can we talk about dream equipment? Because you guys know I keep sending you, especially you, Phil, links to Ludwig Vistalite kits. Guys, if you've never checked out a Vistalite kit,
Oh, those
this
are the
is
links you
speaking
send
to
me, mate.
Yeah. Less said about those, the better. It's a family show. But no, Vistalite kits are those like plasticky vinyl see-through looking kits that Bonham would play back in the day, and I really want to get the Ludwig Zepp set, it's called, which is like a reissue of what John Bonham played back in about 1976, I think. Huge size drums. I was talking about the Fusion kit earlier. This is completely the opposite end of the spectrum. 26-inch bass drum, and that's just the start of it. That is my dream kit. I'm gonna get one. Phil's having a heart attack thinking about how we're gonna fit it in his van.
My left ear has already taken enough punishment from you over the years. Please, no more. The drums cannot get any bigger or louder.
There will be a way. But well, guys, if you had, let's pick a figure out of the air. I was thinking $5,000.
won't touch the surface, mate.
No, well, I was thinking that, mate, because $5,000 can get you off an awful lot in the drum world, I think.
That's because
But
they're
with-
cheap and no one wants them.
You could literally add a zero.
Especially if
to
the
that.
floor tom leg falls off.
Exactly. But I think that could be. God, there's so many subjects here. The first one I wanted to ask you is, if you had $5,000, what would you buy? But the second topic of conversation might be, I feel for you guys because, like for me, I can pick up a 1960s Ludwig drum kit every day of the week for 1,600 quid. My 3-piece kit. Okay, it was like a re-wrapped one, but fundamentally it's a 1960s kit. All day long I could get 50s things. I mean, over here I've got a 50s Radio King snare drum I'm borrowing off a mate, and you could get the whole kit of this for like $2,000. But you guys, if you're trying to get like a 50s Fender, you're like remortgaging the house, am I right?
You need
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
25 grand to do
Absolutely.
something
I mean,
like
that's
that.
Depending
crazy.
on condition, if it's mint, it could be
More,
you know.
yeah. Oh, look,
Yeah.
59 Les Paul.
Well, yeah, guitars are so dependent on the specifics. I could be wrong. Maybe this is the case with drums as well. But with guitars, it's not just about the year. It's about, the model, who played it, why that guitar is iconic. And you can see variations within it, within 1 year. Was it early in that year or was it late in that year? Did something happen at the brand? And that can literally be the difference of thousands of pounds.
Wow, amazing.
The 59, like you say, Phil, is the perfect example. A 59 Les Paul famously would cost you something around £250,000 if you were to
Christ.
find one. Yet you could pick up an earlier model than that for far less. Or you could go a few years later and still pay far less. There's so many factors with guitars. It really is a kind of a minefield of prices and
who played them, obviously. I mean, if if for example Jimmy Page hadn't have played those Les Pauls, Paul Kossoff, would they, Peter Green, would they be worth what they're worth, do you think? I don't know.
I
because
guess what you're saying there, Phil, is that guitarists are just cooler than drummers because we've managed to inflate that gear so much higher than drums. I mean, Ringo Starr played a 60s Ludwig, but you can pick one up for 1,500 quid. So,
But then I guess, do you think the other thing that goes with it, guys, is that it's a collector's thing, isn't it? I mean, we know like loads of people, like our good friend Guy Mackenzie, of course,
Yes.
who's got an unbelievable Guy. If you're listening to this, hello, we love you, mate. He's got an unbelievable guitar collection, but he doesn't play guitar. He's a drummer, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's the thing with guitars is that you can get one and hang it on the wall, where you can hardly have this bloody thing set up in the conservatory for your aunt and uncle to come around and have a look at. It's not like a very convenient thing to collect, is it? But
No,
I mean,
true.
look at behind you, Phil. Again, the audience can't appreciate this, but there must be 20 guitars behind you, or right there, mustn't there?
It's 36 at the minute.
Fair enough. So, is that a thing that inflates it? That your average Joe will pick one up for the hell of it? And
definitely.
for the fun of it?
And also, I think probably a problem with drums is because there's multiple components to a drum kit.
Yes.
You've managed to pick things up that have been broken up, and it's very rare for a kit to stay together. You're not going to get all the hardware, the cymbals, everything, where obviously a guitar, fenders, the body and the neck can come apart. You can take pickups out, but generally that collectability is going to be easier to find in the guitar world.
Goes a little deeper with guitars. Obviously, there's pedals, amplifiers. Trying to get like a vintage box as well can cost a fair whack as well.
Yeah.
This is really annoying because between me and my dad, we've had all this vintage stuff. I mean, my dad had a '62 Strat. He had a 64 335.
Again, going back to what Lee said, 62. Like obviously that was the year. Is it in? I'm trying to think of the month now. Is it like March? Prior to March, it was pre-CBS or something.
That's 65. 1965. CBS took over.
Yeah.
See, again, and that's a funny period as well, which the value of those vintage instruments will increase a little bit more. And
yeah, they definitely. When you get into the realms of 60s and 50s guitars, they're really, unless you're very fortunate and very well off, they cease to be working instruments. I think most of those prices they're collectors. They've moved into the world of antiques, and pricing on antiques is so variable and so dependent on all these different aspects that often to try and figure it out, unless you're a collector, it is just impossible. Really, you can find there are some quirky models that for whatever reason never became collectible, and if you're a working musician, they're often the way to go. We used to
Music
get
Master.
Yeah, exactly. We used to get 50s. I think it was like the ES125 Gibsons, like a full hollow body, looked like, a bit like this that I've got here today, single P90. And you're looking at a guitar from like 1955, but you could pick one up for 1,500 quid. Yeah, you try and get a Gibson Les Paul from that era, you're going to be spending a lot more. So looking out for those quirks in the collectability can often be a good way to go if you want to get something old.
You're listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast.
Has anyone got anything else that they want to mention in this very special podcast that we have with Al today before we do some plugs and give out some socials and stuff like that?
I was going to ask you guys a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Quick fire question.
Okay.
I've got two for you. Couple of word answers. Chris, we'll start with you. Desert Island guitar.
The silence.
Fender Strat, absolutely.
Fender Strat.
I know I won't be able to plug it in. There'll probably be no electric.
Desert Island amp.
Still.
With the
Desert
wind-up
Island.
solar panel.
Yeah.
Lee, what are you going for?
I'd probably say something like a Gibson J45 acoustic guitar. For
I thought Lee's
But the
answer
thing
would
is,
be, well,
you'll
how
get-
much
you'll-
is it?
Shut up.
You won't be able to bend any strings, and it'll just be.
All right,
you know,
well, maybe I've got this casino hit today. And
I think
like-
that's a
I like
halfway
playing
house that
because
is,
it's a fully hollow electric guitar,
Nice.
which means that I can get a bit of acoustic volume out of it.
I
when
can't
don't
believe
have
how
an amp.
light that guitar is.
It's made of balsa
Yeah,
wood,
man.
that's why.
Jesus.
Go on
Right,
then,
move
Phil.
along. Let's wrap this up.
Move
Come on,
along,
Phil.
move
What's your
along.
answer?
I've already got it. It's round my neck. It's my number 1 70s Strat. That everybody knows that I
Oh.
play my white one. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
The
it.
cream one.
Yeah, that's the one. When I do Hendrix and yeah, that dream guitar. If anyone says, "Oh, what's your dream guitar?" I've already got it.
So, what was question 2?
I don't know if it's a quick one, guys, but if you had $5,000, what you buying? Lee, what you buying?
A ticket out of here. You'd just see the back of me and I'd be gone. See you later.
Fair
Five
enough.
grand, is that all it'd take? I can give you that now.
Oh, please do. No, I don't know. I would. There's a few things on my list. Like we've said, it'd be so easy to just splash that on one guitar because ideally I would like something old. I'd probably look for that vintage Gibson J45 or a Martin. I've always wanted a real old acoustic because I think there's something magic about an acoustic that's got some years under its belt. You can really see the play wear on it. It sounds cliche, but you can see the stories in the guitar. So it wouldn't necessarily be a gigger, but to have a living room J45 with 30, 40 years of life under its belt, that would be amazing for me.
Go on, Chris. What are you going for?
Yeah, I think I'd do something similar. Yeah, an old like semi-hollow acoustic, something like an old Hofner like Senator thing, but maybe like a Gibson range or some kind. I think just you come home from a a week of gigging or something, just kind of bring you down to zero. Just sit there in like moody lights in your lounge or something, glass of wine or port. Yeah, just with an acoustic, absolutely heaven. I think. Yeah, £5 would go. Wouldn't go very far, I don't think.
I'd probably buy a gold-plated ukulele with a chaos pad in it. Like Matt Bellamy from Muse.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I've been dying to say this all night. Shut up, Al.
Yeah. I'm sure the listeners are thinking the same.
Yeah. I think
Come on, Phil,
£5 for me, Al, would be a case for my white Strat.
Oh, lovely.
No, I think I would. I've got the guitars I need. I don't. The only guitars that I'm ever buying from now on, I think, for the foreseeable future, everyone's for the show. I've just bought a new one for the show. But on a personal level, I think I will put the money into an amp. I love Dr. Z amps, so I will probably.
Brad Paisley's a big user as well, and I know you love Brad Paisley.
Yeah,
Is that why you'd go Dr. Z? Do you think? Or?
I've heard other people use Dr. Z's. I've heard one live. I was doing sound a few years ago at the Exchange in Sturminster Newton, and the guy there had a red Dr. Z amp on stage, and believe it or not, I kept telling him to turn it up when I took him out of the PA because he just sounded so good. Brad Paisley once said, he said, it's a shame that people listen to my amp through microphones on CDs. He says people don't actually get to hear the quality of it in a room. And yeah, I get that. So I'd spend the money on an amp because I've got all the guitars I need.
Right, well, yeah, let's wrap this up, fellas, because I'm sure people have got lots to do out there whilst they're living their lockdown lives. Should I just say, by the way, optimistic news about this vaccine.
Yeah.
It looks like we might get our industry back next year, so fingers crossed for that. Let's hope everything moves forward positively.
Absolutely.
Thank you to everyone for listening to this podcast. We really do hope it's bringing you some enjoyment through these days where we can't get out there and enjoy live music. If you want to find us on Instagram, you can search Phil Walker Guitar, Lee Troy Guitar, and Chris Anthony Guitar. And Alan, you're on Instagram as well. We can find
just
you.
my personal account, just Allan Varnfield.
Allan Varnfield, VARNFIELD. And you can find us on Facebook as well. So that is Phil Walker Guitarist, Lee Williams Guitarist, and it is Chris Anthony Guitar on Facebook. And you can probably find out on there. But
Allan Varnfield. Just Google Allan Varnfield, everybody.
No, in fact, don't Google Allan Varnfield. You don't know what you're going to find.
You really don't want to do
You'll find a Dorset police article. Please dismiss that.
And not forgetting the Story of Guitar Heroes as well, which on Facebook, search Story of Guitar Heroes. On Instagram, search Story of Guitar Heroes. And on YouTube, search Phil Walker Guitarist.
There we go, folks. I think that's a wrap, chaps. I think we're done. That was good fun. Everyone have fun?
It was
Thanks
great
for
fun.
having me, chaps.
Great. The fun's wearing off because my port's gone now. I've drunk a whole bottle of port through this.
Be sure to subscribe, like I say, and keep an eye out because we'll be uploading the next episode shortly.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
We're rubbish at goodbyes, aren't we?
I just don't want to say goodbye. I just
stay here forever.
Oh dear. There's a good way of getting everybody out. Your tea's ready. Take care, guys. See you next time.
Bye.